Ow, they're saying him hi. What is that? Hey guys, what's up? My name is Skyweb and I'm here to talk about a true crime story that I cannot get off my mind. But before I get started, I just want to put out a little disclaimer that I mean no harm to any of the victims or the victims' families, and I wish everybody who was hurt within this story the utmost peace and solace, either in rest or in recovery. With that out of the way, welcome to True Crime Thursday. I am so glad to see you guys back here. I'm so happy to have you watching this video. I really hope you enjoy it. Please make sure to give it a big thumbs up if you feel like it, and be sure to subscribe so you can see all my new videos. I post every single Thursday all about true crime. Today we're going to be looking into the murder of 15-year-old cheerleader Kirsten Costas. Kirsten Costas was born on the 23rd of July 1968 in Oakland, California. She lived with her parents and her brother Peter, and they were both raised in a small town called Orinda. Kirsten was a really talented young girl. She participated in a lot of sporting teams like the swim team and the cheerleading squad, and she also participated in a lot of extracurricular activities like the yearbook committee, things along those lines. She maintained really good grades, she was very organized, she was very intelligent. Overall, she was a really good student, and her looks and her social life was important to her too. Kirsten attended Miramont High School, and this school was very competitive. A lot of the students there had parents who were very successful and very rich and sort of the top or the head of their respective careers.
These were kids who were the sons and daughters of very successful parents. They wanted to replicate their parents' successes.
And so the kids at Miramont High School were very much so encouraged to be the best and do the best. And if you weren't perfect, or if you weren't doing the best that you could, then you really didn't matter very much. If you weren't good at something, if you couldn't be better than someone else at something, you didn't really matter at Miramont High School. Like I mentioned, Kirsten was in a lot of sporting teams. And at a school like Miramont High School, that wasn't really an easy feat. It was really competitive and hard to get into some of these teams. So a lot of people did respect Kirsten for being in so many different sporting teams and being a part of so many different groups. But there was also a large number of students who envied Kirsten for this reason, because obviously other people were trying out for these things and not getting in, but Kirsten would, and a lot of people felt like she constantly stole their place in different teams. Kirsten and her friends, a group of girls who were equally as pretty as she was, equally as smart, equally as good at sport or good at something. They were all good at something. They all got invited to join this elite socialite group at Miramont High School called the Bobbies, and they referred to the Bobbies as the Bobbies.
Your whole identity was being wrapped around what club you belonged to and where you were in the social status. There was this huge group of girls with flowing hair and cute outfits, and that group was the core, the most popular.
Now, if you were a part of the Bobbies, you were the best of the best at Miramont High School. You were the prettiest, you were the funniest, you were the nicest, you were the most charitable, you were the best at sport, you were the best with the best grades. Something about you was the best if you were a part of the Bobbies, and everybody knew it. You had to work hard to be in the Bobbies. You didn't just get invited because you had a pretty face. You had to be overall a very well-shaped person to be invited in the Bobbies. The problem was, because it was so elite and so socialite, a lot of the students felt like the Bobbies felt as though they were better than everybody else, and they could be very snobby and they could be very rude, because if you were a part of the Bobbies, you couldn't just talk to anybody. You had to talk to the cool people. You had to talk to the popular people and the smart people and the people who were going to take you places. So at the end of every year, the Bobbies would invite a brand new group of girls to be initiated into the Bobbies, because obviously the older girls had to leave high school and therefore weren't a part of it, and so they would bring new girls in every year. In 1984, Kirsten, along with her friend Lauren Shear and Bernadette Protti, they were all invited into the Bobbies. In order to join, they would have to do some sort of weird initiation prank or initiation activity or something along those lines, and that was basically to prove that like you would do what you're told and do what you're asked of, and that you were really determined and really wanted to be in this group, and you would do anything to get into this group, because at the time those girls would have. So while on summer vacation, basically the girls just sat around and waited, because that was the time when they would be called out to do the initiation prank or the initiation activity, whatever it is. So about 2 weeks into the summer vacation, Kirsten was away on cheerleading camp, but her house phone gets a call. So her mum answers, and it's a girl from the Bobbies, and she's saying that there's a Bobbies initiation dinner on Saturday night. If Kirsten can come, she'll be picked up at 6 p.m, then taken to the initiation dinner where she will be initiated into the Bobbies, and then that's it, she's a Bobbie. And Kirsten's mum knew how much Kirsten wanted to be a part of the Bobbies. As I said, pretty much the whole town knew about the Bobbies and about how important it was and how elitist it was, and it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. And so Kirsten's mum was like, thank you so much, I'll let her know, she will be there, no worries, she's not here right now, but Saturday she will be here, I promise. So on the Saturday night at 6 p.m, Kirsten is picked up, like they said, by someone in a yellow Ford Pinto. Then if we fast forward a couple of hours, we find Kirsten knocking on her neighbour's front door. So her neighbour comes out to see what the commotion is, and he finds Kirsten on the floor at his door covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times. So the neighbour that found her, his name was Arthur, and he knew who she was, and he knew that she was a really nice, well-mannered girl who didn't really seem like she got into any trouble, and so he was absolutely dumbfounded at the sight, absolutely in shock, horrified, had no idea what to do. So of course his first reaction is to like look around and be like, what has just happened? Is there a threat? What's going on? And he actually sees a silver Volvo speeding away down the road. So from there the police are obviously called, and Kirsten is actually rushed to hospital, but unfortunately they weren't able to stop the bleeding in time, and she did pass away. She died from her stab wounds. So the police start taking statements straight away on the scene to find out what happened, and they start questioning Arthur, as he's literally the only one that saw anything. He was the only one there as far as they knew, and he starts telling them about this silver Volvo that sped down the road. And so the police ask him basic questions like, did you see who was driving? What were they wearing? Did you catch the number plate? Is there any like defining factors about this person? Just questions that would help them track them down if they needed to. And as Arthur starts to explain himself and what he saw, guess who pulls up? This silver Volvo. And I just find that so creepy, because can you imagine thinking someone had murdered someone and you're describing the murder, and next minute they just pull up right next to you as you're dobbing on that? Oh my god, I would have shit my pants. Anyway, the owner of the Volvo immediately gets out of the car. He comes over to the police and he introduced himself. So his name was Alex Arnold, and he actually lived just a couple of towns over from Orinda. So he starts telling police what happened, and as it turns out, Kirsten had actually knocked on his door, which, as I said, is a couple of towns over. She had knocked on his door and asked to use his phone, and he said, sure, no worries, come on in. And he claims that she was very distressed and nervous and anxious and just really keen to get home. He said that she called her parents, but they didn't answer because they weren't home. And so he said, hey, do you want me to take you home? It's only Orinda, like that's not that far. I have no issue taking you home if you want. And she accepted that offer. So in the car, he's like,
hey, so what's up? Like, why are you by yourself? Why do you want to go home? What's going on?
And she was like,
oh, I was just with a friend, but they got weird.
And he didn't really know what she meant by that, and he didn't ask her to elaborate, so we don't really know what she meant by they got weird at this point. From there, he notices a yellow Ford Pinto driving behind him, and he's like,
I think that car's following us.
He was like,
do you know who that is? I'm pretty sure they're following us. Like, do you know what's going on?
And she just said,
don't worry about it.
And so again, he didn't really question her, he just kept driving. So when they arrived outside Kirsten's house, she asked him to wait in the car until she was inside. And then she told him that she was going to walk from his car to her neighbour's front door, knock on the neighbour's door, and get the neighbour to then escort her over to her house, rather than her just going straight to her house, because the neighbour's house was closer. So at this point, Alex was aware of the fact that she didn't feel comfortable, and I don't know why she didn't get Alex to walk her to the front door rather than going to the neighbour's door by herself to then be escorted. I'm not really sure what the reasoning was behind that, but she starts heading towards the neighbour's house, Arthur's house. And as she does so, the owner of the yellow Ford Pinto gets out, and it's a girl, and she has blonde hair. And Alex describes her as being chunky, Chunky is a terrible descriptive word because chunky means something different to literally every person that you say it to. Like, anyway. He described her as being chunky with stringy blonde hair. And so Alex says that she started walking towards Kirsten, and Kirsten immediately turned around and said, "Go away, you're weird, I don't want to be your friend, you're a loser, you're weird, go away." And at this point, the driver of the yellow Ford Pinto starts to run towards her, and when they meet, they start to have like a tussle. And so he thinks that they're having like a fist fight. So then when the driver runs back to the car and speeds off, he thinks, oh, well, I'll go chase her down and find out who it is so we can, you know, hold her accountable for this fight that they've just had. Not realizing that what really happened is this blonde girl had actually stabbed Kirsten in the stomach, the hand, and the back as she was trying to run away. And Kirsten was in desperate need of medical attention, but Alex claims he wasn't aware of this, and so he followed the car, lost the yellow Pinto, and that's why he came back and saw all the police and immediately introduced himself because he was like, oh my god, what has happened? He thought it was just a little fight. Police didn't just take his word for it though. Obviously they did some investigating and they did find out that at his house 2 towns away, he had a group of people staying there. They were actually having like a party or a game night, and so they were all able to corroborate his story. And his wife was even able to corroborate the yellow Ford Pinto because she saw them following her husband and Kirsten, but she just thought that it was a random car on the road following, not someone like actually following them. But she was able to corroborate that there was that car there. So that's really all the police had to go off, which should be easy, you know, like a blonde girl with that particular car in a small town. It shouldn't be too hard, right? So the investigators start to look at all of Kirsten's friends one by one, all of the girls. And what they did was try to give each and every girl a motive so that if something clicked into place, you know, they could try and work back from there. So then they'd be like, oh, well, Bernadette, the girl that I mentioned earlier, well, she didn't get on the cheerleading team this year and Kirsten did. So maybe it's Bernadette, maybe she was jealous. That's her motive. And then they'd look at someone like Lauren Shear, who I also mentioned earlier, and they'd be like, well, she was on the swim team with Kirsten, so maybe they had a rivalry, and maybe Kirsten was beating Lauren all the time, so maybe that's her motive. She wanted to get rid of her, and so on and so forth. They would just continue to give motives to every single girl, no matter what. No matter how innocent they seemed, they would try to wedge a motive in there. And then they started talking to Kirsten's friend, Ashley. Now, Ashley told police that she and Kirsten used to prank call people. It was like calling up the uglier kids, the less popular kids, the kids who they classed as losers or outcasts or weirdos, as Kirsten liked to call people weird, and they would make fun of these kids. And so now police were looking at this as maybe people viewed Kirsten as a bully, and maybe that's a motive. Since that came out, they started getting more and more and more instances like this.
She was just very outspoken and she kind of told it like it was in her own way. I can remember her just being like denigrating, very dismissive. She could be mean, definitely. I think she could be condescending. You know, it was always talking behind your back, talking about you when you're walking in the hall.
And there was just a lot of instances where police were like, hold on a minute, maybe this is about bullying. Maybe this whole image of Kirsten being the perfect girl, the perfect student, the perfect daughter, the perfect friend was just that, an image. It wasn't really her. It didn't truly reflect who she was as a person, because there were so many instances of her being less than friendly. There was one girl in particular who made her opinion of Kirsten very, very obvious, and her name was Nancy Kane. Now, Nancy Kane hated Kirsten, and she hated Kirsten for a number of reasons. First of all, she hated her because she thought she was better than everybody. And Nancy also hated Kirsten because she felt that Kirsten represented everything that was wrong with the school and the community. She felt that she represented the entire youth of Orinda. She hated society's expectations that she should just sit there and act proper and speak well, and she had to look pretty and smile and be polite. She hated that that was something expected of her, and she felt that Kirsten was all of those things and therefore represented all of those things.
I remember looking at her curly hair and being angry at her. Just being angry at what she represented.
That's that's why she wrote about her in her diary.
And I wrote in my notebook, I want to see her blood drip. Drip, drip, drip.
At this point, Nancy's name just kept popping up because every girl in that high school thought that Nancy did it. Every girl in that high school wanted to point the finger at Nancy Kane. Nancy was an outcast. Nancy was a misfit. She was the weird girl in the corner with the coloured hair and the black clothing and the painted nails. And they were so happy and so quick to point the finger at her because it couldn't possibly be any of them. It had to be the weird girl that nobody liked. So of course Nancy was questioned about her whereabouts on the night of the murder, and she told police that she was out seeing a movie.
Police asked me what I did that particular night. I told them I went to see Ghostbusters.
At this point, police asked her, could you do a polygraph test, a lie detector test? And this is something that they got a lot of girls to do. At this point, they had almost every single girl that they had questioned do a lie detector test, and they had all passed. So at this point, they were like, well, if she passes, it's fine. Even though lie detector tests aren't 100% accurate, they're not even allowed to be used in court. They, back then, probably didn't know that. They wanted to see. But Nancy Kane's parents said, no, she can't do one. She's not allowed to do a polygraph test. And so now she stuck out as a bit suspicious because, as I said, every single girl had already done one and passed. So why couldn't Nancy do one and pass? It didn't really add up, and police were very suspicious of this. So the 4th of September was the first day back at school, and this was the first day back without Kirsten. It was a big deal. And guess who doesn't turn up? Nancy Kane doesn't show up at school. Little did they know Nancy Kane had actually visited the police station that day rather than going to school. And she visited the police so that she could tell them,
Hey, I actually lied. I wasn't seeing a movie on the night of the murder.
As it turns out, she lied because she didn't want her mum to know where she'd really been, and where she'd really been was at her boyfriend's house. She wasn't allowed to be at her boyfriend's house on a Saturday night. So Nancy's alibi checked out and she was no longer a suspect, and now the police were back to square one. At this point they were getting pretty desperate. They really had nothing, and so they actually asked the FBI for assistance. So now the FBI stepped in and they were able to put together a criminal psychological profile, which is just a really, really interesting way of basically building up a backstory based on like the clues left behind at the crime scene and using statistical data to create up this whole big backstory for the criminal that they're looking for. So they take the things that they do know, like what weapon they used, and a knife, for example. They would assume that that was someone who was angry because it's like up close and personal and very aggressive rather than like say poison. So straight away they took all these things that they knew and they will go to a prison and look at all the statistical data for the already incarcerated inmates and say there was 90% of inmates who used a knife came from a single parent home. Then they would assume that this person that they're looking for came from a single parent home. Like, it's all statistical, which is crazy because I feel like a lot of people don't believe in statistics in a lot of circumstances, but it is unreal how accurate this was able to get. Unreal how accurate it was. And this was a long time ago, so imagine now all of the statistics that they have, how accurate these profiles can be. If I ever die or go missing, I want one of these done, please. So after 3 months, the FBI had put together a fully complete psychological criminal profile, and it was about 14 pages long. They came to the conclusion that the criminal they were looking for was most likely from a Catholic family, most likely one of 6 children, and most likely friends with the victim. They also came to the conclusion that this attack wouldn't have been planned or intended, and that it was more likely a spur of the moment thing. They determined that it would have been done on impulse of some kind. So now they started looking at all of the girls in Kirsten's school one by one and comparing their lives and their backgrounds to this criminal profile. And one person stuck out as almost a complete exact match. This girl was one of 6 children. She came from a Catholic family where her mum would read the Bible every single day. She'd set a timer and read the Bible every single day. And her retired dad would go and teach religion as just a hobby. She was friends with Kirsten. She was a part of the Bobbies like Kirsten. She had tried out for the cheerleading team like Kirsten, and she had tried out for the yearbook committee, just like Kirsten. So comment down below if you think you know who the murderer is. I mean, you probably don't because I haven't given that many names, but I have given the murderer's name. So if you know, comment. No cheating. Not that there's like a prize or anything, so I guess you can cheat because it doesn't matter, but you probably shouldn't. Okay, so the girl who fit this psychological profile was one of Kirsten's friends, Bernadette Protti. Bernadette, who we did mention earlier, was pretty devastated that she didn't make it onto the cheer team, and she had actually confessed to one of her friends that she felt that it was a little bit unfair that she didn't make it and Kirsten made it when she put so much more effort and hard work and determination into getting into the cheerleading team, and Kirsten didn't. Still, every single girl in their friend group said there was no possible way in the world that it could be Bernadette. No way could she be the murderer. Bernadette's family wasn't as rich or as successful as what some of the other families at the school were. As I said, Kirsten liked to pick on people who weren't as rich as her or as successful as her. Bernadette was a Bobby, and she was a popular girl in her own right, and she was talented and she was skilled, but she still was not exempt from Kirsten's criticism. On a skiing trip earlier in the year, Kirsten had made a smart remark about Bernadette's skis. Because as I said, her family wasn't as rich as everybody else, and so she couldn't afford brand new fancy ass skis. She had borrowed old dingy looking skis, and she was so embarrassed by Kirsten's comment that was in front of everyone that she just was humiliated, because she was horrified to think that people would think less than her, or that she would no longer be popular, or that people wouldn't like her. It was so important to Bernadette to be liked that she almost could not handle the humiliation. All she wanted was to be validated by Kirsten. This is just one of the examples and one of the many ways that Kirsten would speak down to people and belittle people, and especially Bernadette. So at this point, police actually went to Bernadette and showed her the FBI profile, and in response she said,
"That looks exactly like me."
She told investigators that she was actually babysitting on the night of the murder.
It was a horrible, bloody crime, and they thought the kid would break down and cry and show some kind of emotional reaction. She was
super calm during these interviews. She was really cooperative, really nice actually. And she also took a lie detector test just like all the other girls did, and she passed some of it, but some of the results were inconclusive. And the police actually wanted to dismiss her as a suspect because in their eyes, a girl like this isn't a murderer. They just wanted to dismiss her because they felt bad for even questioning her to this extent. The only thing that was holding them back from dismissing her as a suspect was this FBI profiling, and the reason they just couldn't let that go is because it was just so accurate, and they just couldn't bring themselves to completely disregard that. Now police called up this babysitting service that Bernadette used to babysit for, and they said Bernadette hasn't used our services in over a year. They actually got a warrant to go and search her house, and they didn't find anything within the home, but in the garage they did find a yellow Ford Pinto. And a lot of girls at the school actually knew that Bernadette had a yellow Ford Pinto. They knew that that was the family car, but nobody thought that it was the yellow Ford Pinto, and Bernadette didn't even have her license at the time. So Bernadette went home and she started writing some things in her journal, which I'll read out for you now. "I've caused a lot of hurt and pain to a lot of people. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore. I want to go to heaven when I die. I regret what I did. I can't bring Kirsten back or change time. If I kill myself, I will hurt even more people, like my family. But I think I could kill myself. I would go to hell if I killed myself. I would rather kill myself than go on living if people knew. Although it's incredible my parents are saints who would forgive me and love me." On the 10th of December, Bernadette asked her mum if they could talk, but her mum was really tired and said, "Oh, I'll just have a nap first," but she ended up sleeping through the night. So the next morning she was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Bernadette, let's talk now. I'm free." And Bernadette said, "It's fine, don't worry about it. I've written you a letter." And she said, "You can open this letter exactly 30 minutes after I leave, but you have to promise you won't open it until after 30 minutes. So her mum complied with her instructions. She sat down on the couch and started to read her Bible like she did every morning. She put a timer on in the kitchen, And when the timer went off after 30 minutes, she started to read Bernadette's letter. The letter said, "Dear Mum and Dad, I've been trying to tell you this all day, but I love you so much and it's too hard, so I'm taking the easy way out. The FBI man thinks I did it. He's right. I've been able to live with it for a while, but I can't ignore it. It's too much for me and I can't be that deceiving. Please still love me. I can't live unless you love me. I've ruined my life and yours, and I don't know what to do, and I'm ashamed and I'm scared. Please don't say how could I or why, because I don't understand this and I don't know why." After that, her mum went and found her and wanted to spend some time with her, but ultimately she took her straight to the police station where she confessed to the murder.
"I lost for cheerleader and I didn't get on the yearbook staff. All that stuff, she just seemed to sort of represent it, like losing at things or looks or money or popularity or things that are stupid."
So she tells police that on that night she picked Kirsten up to go to a party. She claims that Kirsten was very annoyed from the get-go, very unimpressed to see Bernadette in the car, and Bernadette felt a little bit embarrassed by how disappointed Kirsten seemed. But regardless, Kirsten agreed that they would just go to a party and whatever. She assumed there would be more Bobbies there, and so she sort of took that as an opportunity to socialize and mingle. So they went and sat in a car park to talk for a little bit before they went to the party, and at this point Bernadette had to admit that there actually wasn't a party that they were going to, but that she just wanted to hang out with Kirsten and spend more time with her and get closer to her and be her friend. So Kirsten pulled out some weed and she wanted to smoke weed, and Bernadette claims that this sort of took her aback a little bit. She didn't know that Kirsten smoked weed because that wasn't something that good, proper girls did in Orinda. Bernadette claims she didn't want anything to do with it, and because she didn't want anything to do with it, Kirsten called her weird. Bernadette says that she got very offended and got very scared that Kirsten would turn on her and maybe tell everybody that she was weird and not to be her friend.
"I was afraid she was going to tell everybody I was really weird. But I thought, oh my god, everything's gone wrong. She's going to tell everybody."
And because of this fear, Bernadette started talking more and more and more, trying to redeem herself. And when you're really panicked and doing this and trying to redeem yourself, you sound a little bit weird. Bernadette claims that Kirsten got the wrong impression, and Kirsten thought that Bernadette was coming onto her in a romantic or a sexual way, which Bernadette claims she had no intention of doing. At this point, Kirsten was like, "You're weird, I don't want to be your friend." That's the point where she left the car and went to Alex's house, where she asked to use the phone and then got the lift. And when she saw her driving away with this boy, Bernadette freaked out. She thought that Kirsten was going to go and tell everybody that she was lesbian and weird and a freak and that no one should be her friend. And so she followed the car. And when she got there, she had no intention of hurting Kirsten. But as Bernadette saw Kirsten walking towards the neighbour's house and looking at the yellow Ford Pinto with sort of a disapproving or disgusted look, that's when she absolutely lost it. She grabbed a knife beside her, which was in the car already, and ran over to Kirsten and stabbed Kirsten Costas to death. So Bernadette's trial went ahead in 1985, and she only had a judge, not a jury. Her defense wanted a plea deal for second-degree murder because they refused to admit that there was any premeditation or planning involved, but the plea deal was dismissed, and so the trial went forward. Bernadette's 25-year-old sister testified that the knife in the car had actually been hers. As I said, it was a family car, and so they would all use it. And Bernadette's sister claimed that she used that knife to cut up her vegetables for lunch every day before she went to school or work. I forget which. My bad. So she was trying to prove that Bernadette hadn't brought it intentionally. She said that it was just there by circumstance. Prosecutors did try to claim that nobody uses a knife of that scale to cut up vegetables. It was like a fairly big knife, and so they tried to push the ideal that that was made up and that Bernadette did in fact bring it with her. The defense claimed that she had been emotionally provoked by Kirsten calling her weird and calling her names, and that fear of social reject status. Not to blame Kirsten or anything. The defense wasn't trying to blame Kirsten, but merely just state that it was her words and actions that caused the emotion within Bernadette, that caused her decision making to kill her, if that makes sense. And at this point, speculation arose that maybe Bernadette had been coming onto Kirsten. because why would an emotional response that bad be provoked by something so small as being called weird? A lot of people didn't understand her desperation for wanting to be liked in general, and they thought that Bernadette wanted to be liked by Kirsten because she was interested in Kirsten. In the end, Bernadette Protti was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 9 years in a youth facility. So this was actually the maximum punishment because Bernadette was only 16 years old at the time, meaning she had to be trialed as a minor. So she was actually released from prison on parole when she was 23 years old, and she was able to change her name and move states with her family. I do know her new name now and what she looks like now because I couldn't help myself but to look it up, but I'm not going to put that in here just because I feel like it might be unnecessary. So a lot of people in the community obviously feel like that short amount of time incarcerated is not enough to bring justice for what she did to Kirsten. Anyway, that is the story of the cheerleading murder, the story of Kirsten Costas. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm sorry it's so long. I just felt like there were a lot of interesting details in this one to throw in. It's probably also worth adding that this has been turned into movies and TV shows and all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't recommend watching the movie. I don't think it's a very good movie or a very accurate portrayal of what actually happened, but that's beside the point. And I actually watched it when I was like 4 years old, and I had this memory of a girl writing a letter to her parents and saying, "I'm so sorry I killed her, it felt like a dream," which I think it must say that in the movie because it doesn't say that in this. But anyway, just a little piece of completely pointless information for you. So let me know what you guys think about this story. I'd love to know what you think about Bernadette claiming that it wasn't premeditated. Do you believe that it was completely acting out of impulse, or do you think she put that knife in there herself and planned to hurt Kirsten that night? I'd really love to know what you think about that one. I'd also love to know what you think about her actual sentencing and whether or not you think that was too long or too short. I doubt anyone thinks it's too long, but do you think it was deserved? And also, if you have any opinions on Kirsten herself, I'd love to hear those as well. Make sure to comment your opinions down below, or you can head over to my Facebook, which is Skyweb with 3 Bs, and let me know there. I'd absolutely love to hear your opinions. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you feel like it. I would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you can see all my new videos. I post every single Thursday all about true crime, and I'd love to have you be a part of the family. Make sure you guys are being safe out there. Don't try out for the cheer squad. Do not join the Bobbies. And most importantly, don't stab your friends for calling you weird. Just embrace the fucking weird, my dude. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be safe. Goodbye.